Okay, so if you were to look up the Iranian protests right now, as of a week ago, the deaths were few and far between. As of today, there is a range of deaths depending on the source and depending at the time of the source was published, whether you're relying on human rights groups, whether you're relying on direct footage. But I've seen ranges of numbers of the amount who have died between 400 and 650. Mind you, the last two times we talked about this on the show, the first time we were talking about 10 deaths, then we were talking about over 60 deaths, and now the ranges are in the hundreds upon hundreds upon hundreds of deaths of Iranian protesters. This situation has spiraled quickly. What started as market protests, railing against the nation's inequality, railing against inflation, railing against currency collapse, railing against government fiscal mismanagement, railing against the general economic issues of the day. The government responded to that by saying that they're willing to negotiate, but they weren't really willing to negotiate much, i.e., we're willing to negotiate, we're willing to give you something roughly to the equivalent of like $7 in like subsidies, like handouts. We're willing to give you something to try to get you to go home. But if you're getting a subsidy here and a handout there, but the currency is collapsing, like they can print you money, but if the money's still worthless, then you're still in the same place, right? This is something that could maybe kick the can down the road a few months, but this is certainly not a solution to what got people on the streets in the first place, which is economic issues. The thing about economic issues is previous protests in Iran, they have been spawned by a few things. One of them was the death of a woman who was wearing a hijab incorrectly, and so the morality police in Iran, showing the morality, beat her to death. And this caused a series of protests as women said that they wanted to control their own bodies. And they also said they didn't want to be beaten to death by morality police. Oh, and their loved ones also didn't want to see their loved ones beaten to death by morality police. So many of them protested as well. But this has to do with civil liberties. This has to do with the idea of you wear what you want to wear, you be who you want to be, you are who you are, right? That's you being able to go out there and express yourself and disagree. The different types of civil liberties people enjoy. That's ideological. That has to do with quality of civil society. That has to do with certain personal freedoms. But the thing is, personal freedoms do not give your stomach hunger. They might give your soul hunger, but they don't give your stomach hunger. But that stomach hunger is a gnawing pain that is physical, that grips you and tells you eat or survive. And when you're dealing with so many different economic issues, that's what you need to be thinking about. Eat or survive, reform or survive is essentially the location that the government's in. They either reform their economic structure so that people can get the help that they need, so that people can not experience currency collapse, rapid inflation, they can build up savings, they can get somewhere in Iranian society, that they can have electricity 24 hours in the day maybe, that they can not have terrible water shortages and have better water management. Not send all your water to farming irrigation that consumes way too much. So these economic issues were the starting point. And while, that's not necessarily all expansive of the rest of society and all of the issues that's wrong with the regime or what has motivated other people to get out before, this is something that's particularly convincing because hunger is direct and it's universal. If you feel it, you feel it. But from there, the government understood this is economic. This isn't civil liberties. This is something we're going to have to respond to with a softer hand. And so they didn't immediately open fire in massive margins, but they certainly didn't want the protests to expand, but they did anyway. The situation was not helped from the Iranian government's perspective, from Donald Trump coming out and saying after some protests died and a few security officials died, that if protesters are murdered, that the United States would intervene and that they are, and I quote, locked and loaded. Essentially saying, our ammunition's ready to fire, threatening to bomb Iran over the killing of protesters. But as the protests expanded to over 100 Iranian cities, spiraled, and the government control suffered or let's just say struggled to keep, their boots on the ground, struggled to keep, control of the situation. They started opening fire more regularly. One way that it was reported, and of course, this is very difficult to get information. It's not easy to just be like, hello, Iranian authorities. Would you like to tell us all the things that display your government negatively? But the way that it was being talked about is before they would shoot kind of in front of the crowd with live ammunition to scare them away, where then now it's one of the people, a lot of them have rubber bullets, and then one of them has like real bullets. And so that the rubber bullets combined with the real bullets will kill people, but it also won't kill everybody. It'll scare other people away. That's one way it has been talked about being done. It could also be that they started shooting in front of them, and when that doesn't work, they just start shooting into them. I mean, it could be any number of ways, but the point is, guns have been fired into crowds, and we know that this is the case because there is video footage of bodies on the ground. And while it might be difficult to get exact numbers, it's kind of difficult to conduct a straw poll in the middle of this protest movement. The video taped bodies are impossible to deny. Now, whether or not the protest death number is at 350, 400, 650, or since this is 10 hours old, possibly more, these all cross a red line that Donald Trump has set. Donald Trump went out there and he said that if the Iranian government goes out there and murders protesters, that he would intervene, that he would bomb them. He was acting as a deterrent. Right after the Maduro blackbagging, as if to use the momentum of the Maduro blackbagging to add seriousness to this statement, to make it seem more credible in the eyes of the Iranians. Well, now there is no more denying it. Before, at the start, we're like, oh, he's saying we'll intervene if civilians die. And I remember saying at the time, well, I mean, the odds of that happening is very, it's very likely. So what is Trump going to do? And civilians started dying. I thought that the red line had been crossed when the death toll passed 60. Now that the death toll is in the hundreds, whether it's 400, 600, 700, or more, this is clearly past the red line that Donald Trump had set. Donald Trump said that if they bombed, killed, murdered, if they brought death to the protesters, that he would intervene, that he would bomb, that he would go in there. Well, right now we have hundreds of bodies. So what now? Does he go back and say, well, let's wait till it's 1,000. He said he could set a new red line, which would make him look uncredible. He could try a different response, for example, sanctions, or trying to get some other third party to do it, like the Israelis, like greenlighting an Israeli operation, even though the Israelis would then immediately turn to the United States and say, United States, could you support our operation? But I think tariffs, sanctions, though, like, these are other tools at their disposal. But again, anything that's a replacement for what he was first signaling, which was strikes, which was intervention, is removing his credibility, is removing the credibility of here is a threat and here is me delivering on that threat. Now, this is bad for a few reasons. Number one, this could make it so it degrades the credibility for actions like this in the future. And when the US president in the future says, please don't kill all those protesters, they might not take it seriously. There's also a question about the United States credibility in itself. And of course, Donald Trump's credibility, the White House credibility in itself, that is all being degraded by them responding either through tariffs or responding not at all. Obviously, responding not at all would do worse degradation. Responding through tariffs, of course, still do some. So on one hand, Trump could wait and try to get to this new red line, but that would degrade his position. Trump could respond with sanctions, but that would degrade his position and degrade the United States position. Or he could strike directly right now in Iran and deliver on his promise. Now, if he does that, that does not mean the Iranian government's going to collapse. Just because Donald Trump goes in there and bombs some police stations or bombs army bases related to the attacks, as in bombing the bases of those soldiers that are coming out and actually shooting protesters, that doesn't necessarily mean that the government's going to collapse. In fact, It could just mean dead soldiers, pissed off soldiers, and then the soldiers, unable to get their hands on Americans, are able to get their hands on protesters who the Ayatollah has said is, working on behalf of the US president who has Iranian blood on their hands. And then if the US president comes out and puts some more blood on his hands by striking these bases, whether or not those bases were involved in the suppression of protests, that could lead to more violence on the ground. The United States, uh, if the United States did Operation Provide Comfort because we asked the Kurds to rise up against Saddam, and then we didn't go in there to support him, and what did Saddam do? He lashed out at them brutally. He killed a lot of them. So, we don't want a situation where the United States has basically told the Iranian people, hey, go out there, go support your freedom, go out there, and we're all in this together. And then the Iranians go out there and they protest, and then they die in the hundreds to thousands. And then the United States is like, well, we can't put troops on the ground. Well, we can't really guarantee whatever government changes is going to be. Well, I mean, we can bomb stuff, but we can't secure stuff on the ground, which is the only way you could really certify that the Iranian government's still not in power. And so the Trump administration, whether or not this was an attempt to just use the momentum of Maduro, whether this is an attempt to please Netanyahu, who has been asking for more strikes on the Iranians for a moment now, whether this is a precursor to allow the United States or create more public support for the United States striking Iran again, because it does not seem that their atomic program has been put to a halt, that it has been delayed. And if it's been delayed, that means that it can still be pushed forward, which means the United States hasn't dealt with the issue. And this is something that's being directly speculated about, whether or not the United States was going to strike Iran, irrespective, putting aside any horrible violence towards protesters. There was a question whether or not the United States was going to strike Iran just to continue delaying this atomic program, continuing to kick that can down the road until it's time to kick it again, until they get close enough in the development process again. And I'm sure every time the Iranians will try to harden their systems more, try to make it more resilient. And maybe one time we miss, or one time they're too fast for us, and then they have the A-bomb. Either way, though, the put it aside the fact that we don't have a long-term solution to that. There was a question about whether or not the United States was going to bomb Iran regardless. Mind you, the way they were talking about that atomic program before, they were saying smashed, obliterated. They were using every descriptive word they could to basically imply that it's gone. Well, it doesn't seem like it's gone. If you need to do follow-up strikes, not even a year later, then obviously it wasn't obliterated. It was damaged. So I don't know if Donald Trump is going to allow himself to be looked at as red line Obama in the same ways that Obama put red lines in the sand and then they were crossed because the consequences of actually delivering on those red lines are too big. And maybe Trump just wanted to see if it would act as an incentive, if it would be enough without American action, because real power is getting others to act without you having to commit resources, because just the threat of it is enough to get them to act. But we do have something from Donald Trump that is some consequence for the hundreds dead as we wait to see if he's going to deliver on his promises. Effective immediately, any country doing business with the Islamic Republic of Iran will pay a tariff of 25% on any and all business being done with the United States of America. This order is final and conclusive. Thank you very much for your attention to this matter. China imports a lot of most of Iran's energy exports go to China. So is this going to be on top of the tariffs we've already placed? Is this something that we would relaunch the China trade war for? Do these stack, or if we already have a 25% tariff on somebody and then they're trading with Iran, would this be a 25% tariff on top of that, putting it at 50% tariff? Or would we just say, oh, it's still at 25, just keep it at 25, you're already at the right rate, right? That isn't particularly clear. It would kind of make it pointless, though, in trying to disincentivize a country if whether or not they do business with Iran, the outcome is the same, though. Either way, if this is delivered on, not only could this mean damaging a trading relationship with China, not only could this mean damaging the potential relaunching of the trading relationship with Russia, but I think most importantly, this is not a strike. Whatever effects this could have on the American economy, if this stacks on Iran's trading partners, putting that aside for a moment, this is not what the president said he would do. The president said that he would intervene to support the protesters. If you were told we're going to intervene, oh, we'll bomb this, we'll bomb that, and you're like, okay, I'm going to go out and protest, and then 650 bodies later, you look over to those who said they would intervene, and they said, we'll place a tariff on other countries related to your country. That's very different from the direct intervention that was being implied. That's different from the direct physical support through an air campaign. That's very different through the physical disincentive and deterrence that was trying to be established. So, I mean, not only is this just Trump falling once again on his tariff approach that is questionably constitutional, but it's him completely ignoring or even abandoning this deliverance of a promise. We don't know if he is abandoning it yet, but if this is all that ends up being delivered, then we said, we'll come in and help you. Then they go protest, they're attacked, and we say, in other ways, not through the bombing that we said we would. Is this disgraceful? Yes. Is it dishonorable? Yes. Is it snaky? Yes. Is it slimy? Yes. Could it mean that a bunch of people might have gone out and protest and potentially died, thinking they would get support from the US president that would not end up materializing? Yes. But we also don't know if the president isn't going to bomb them, because this could be tariffs on top of bombing, economic pressure on an already economically vulnerable state, to say the least, or on the trading partners of the economically vulnerable state, trying to make their partners create pressures that we don't have access to. We don't have access to those levers, only the partners do. At the same time that we could also do these strikes. That could also be done, but that has yet to be seen. The president has been briefed on strikes and potential military options that he might deploy in Iran. So that has been discussed. That's open fact. We know that. Whether or not the United States president will end up making the decision to take that action in Iran, go into Iran, bomb the bases, try to support the protesters, we do not know. And even if they did, I am still not convinced that that would be able to break the hold that the IRGC has on society. And so once that is delivered, that might deal with the problem of undermining U.S. credibility, but I don't see how that necessarily deals with the problem of the protests on the ground. Because if the government continues to fire, continues to bombard the protesters and kill the protesters, what could really stop them? I mean, a sustained bombing campaign, if they really wanted to, they could keep doing it. The shooting at the protesters. The question is whether or not our bombing can create enough of a disincentive to make them stop. And that challenging of the sovereignty of the government to protect itself from these types of dissent could be seen as weakness from the protesters that the government's going to be very afraid of showing, especially if that weakness was exposed by the great Satan.